My name is Harper Taylor, and the day my grandfather died, my mother showed up at his funeral after 12 years of silence, not to mourn, but to claim the $4.85 million he left behind. She thought the money was hers. She was wrong. And when the lawyer read the final line of his will, everything she'd planned came crashing down. I was 23 years old when I got the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning, early October, and I was in my apartment finishing up an online exam for my nursing program when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Is this Harper Taylor? A woman's voice asked.
Yes, this is she.
Ms. Taylor, this is Grace Hernandez from St. Michael's Hospital. I'm calling about your grandfather, James Taylor. I'm very sorry to inform you that he passed away this morning. The words didn't register at first. They just floated there, meaningless. My grandfather, Grandpa James, couldn't be dead. I'd just seen him 3 days ago. We'd had breakfast together at his favorite diner. He'd been fine, laughing, telling me stories about his days in the Navy, about the time he'd sailed through a storm off the coast of Portugal and thought he wouldn't make it home. What happened? I managed to say. He had a massive stroke in his sleep. The caretaker found him this morning. He went peacefully. Peacefully. Such a strange word for something so devastating. I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there on my couch, staring at the wall. The apartment felt too quiet, too still. And then the tears came, hard and fast, until I couldn't breathe. I called my best friend Monica, who rushed over within 20 minutes and held me while I sobbed into her shoulder. My grandfather had been the only constant in my life. When I was 11, my parents divorced, and my mother, Claire, remarried within 6 months to a man named David Brennan. David was charming at first, the kind of man who could sell ice to an Eskimo. He had a quick smile, an easy laugh, and a way of making everyone in the room feel like they were the most important person there. But behind closed doors, he was controlling, manipulative, and cruel. My mother changed after she married him. She became distant, cold. She stopped asking how I was doing at school. She stopped showing up to my soccer games. And when I tried to talk to her about David's behavior, the way he'd yell at me for the smallest things, the way he'd monitor my phone and read my text messages, the way he made me feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own home, she accused me of being dramatic. "You're just jealous that I found someone," she'd said one night after I'd complained about David going through my backpack. "You need to grow up, Harper."
You're not a child anymore.
But I was a child. I was 13 years old. David's control extended to everything. He decided what I could wear, who I could be friends with, what extracurricular activities I was allowed to participate in. He'd stand in the doorway of my room and watch me do my homework, criticizing every mistake. He'd make comments about my weight, about my grades, about how I'd never amount to anything if I didn't get my act together. My mother never defended me. She'd just look away, busying herself with laundry or dinner or whatever excuse she could find to avoid confrontation. So when I was 14, I asked my grandfather if I could live with him. He didn't hesitate. He picked me up that same weekend, and I never went back. Grandpa James became my parent, my mentor, my best friend. He taught me how to balance a checkbook, how to change a tire, how to stand up for myself. He paid for my braces, my SAT prep courses, my college application fees. He showed up to every single one of my volleyball games, sitting in the front row with a thermos of coffee and a proud smile. He also taught me about money, not in a preachy way, but through practical lessons. He showed me his investment portfolio and explained how compound interest worked. He took me to the bank and helped me open my first savings account. He taught me the difference between good debt and bad debt, between needs and wants. "Money is a tool, Harper," he'd say. "It can't buy happiness, but it can buy security. And security gives you the freedom to live the life you want." And now he was gone. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday. I spent the days in between in a fog, making arrangements, notifying relatives, going through the motions. Grandpa James had been meticulous. He'd left detailed instructions for his funeral in a binder he kept in his study. He wanted a simple service, no fuss, just close friends and family. He'd even picked out the music he wanted played, "What a Wonderful World" by Louis Armstrong. I wasn't expecting my mother to show up. But on Saturday morning, as I stood in the funeral home greeting guests, I saw her walk through the door. She was wearing a black dress and oversized sunglasses, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek bun. David was beside her, his hand on the small of her back, guiding her like she was fragile. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen or spoken to my mother in 12 years. Not a single phone call. Not a single text message. She hadn't called on my birthdays. She hadn't asked how I was doing in college. She hadn't even reached out when I'd been hospitalized for appendicitis 2 years ago. As far as I was concerned, she was a stranger. And now here she was, walking toward me with a sad smile, arms outstretched. "Oh, Harper," she said, pulling me into a hug I didn't return. "I'm so sorry. I know how much he meant to you." I stood there stiffly, my arms at my sides. What are you doing here?
He was my father, she said, as if that explained everything. Of course I'm here.
David shook my hand, his grip too firm, too long. Our condolences, Harper. This must be so hard for you. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them to leave. But I was too tired, too heartbroken. So I just nodded and walked away. The service was beautiful. I gave a eulogy, talking about Grandpa James's kindness, his wisdom, his unwavering support. I talked about the lessons he taught me, about integrity, about loyalty, about standing up for what's right even when it's hard. I told the story about the time he drove 6 hours in the middle of the night to pick me up from a college party where I'd felt unsafe. I talked about how he never made me feel like a burden, even when I was at my most difficult. As I spoke, I noticed my mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. It looked performative, rehearsed, like she was playing the role of grieving daughter for an audience. David sat beside her, his face appropriately somber, but I caught him checking his phone twice during my speech. After the service, the guests filtered out, offering their condolences and sharing their own memories of Grandpa James. My mother lingered, talking to people I didn't recognize, laughing softly at stories about my grandfather. She introduced herself as James's daughter and talked about growing up with him, about the trips they'd taken together, about how close they'd been. It was all lies. I knew because I'd lived with Grandpa James for 9 years. He'd talked about my mother exactly 3 times. Once, when he'd explained why I was coming to live with him. Once, on my 18th birthday, when he told me he was proud of the woman I was becoming despite my mother's absence. And once, a year ago, when he'd updated his will and told me he wanted me to be prepared for what would happen after he was gone. Your mother is going to be angry, he'd said. She's going to try to fight this. But I've made my decision, and I've made sure it's airtight. You deserve this, Harper. You've earned it. The next day, we gathered at the office of Mr. Leonard Shaw, my grandfather's attorney, for the reading of the will. It was just me, my mother, David, and Mr. Shaw in a small conference room with wood-paneled walls and a long mahogany table. Mr. Shaw was in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been my grandfather's lawyer for over 30 years. I'd met him several times over the years, usually when Grandpa James needed to update some legal document or review a contract. Thank you all for coming, he said, opening a thick manila folder. James Taylor's will is straightforward, but I want to make sure everyone understands the terms. My mother leaned forward, her hands folded neatly on the table. She'd taken off her sunglasses, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. David sat beside her, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp, calculating. Mr. Shaw began reading. The legal jargon was dense, but the message was clear. To my beloved granddaughter Harper Elizabeth Taylor, I leave the entirety of my estate, including my home at 47 Maple Street, all financial accounts, investment portfolios, and personal belongings. This includes my residence, valued at approximately $890,000, my investment portfolio with Merrill Lynch, valued at approximately $2.1 million, my savings and checking accounts totaling approximately $340,000, my life insurance policy with a death benefit of $500,000, my collection of rare books valued at approximately $120,000, and various other assets. The estimated total value of this estate is approximately $4,850,000. My mother's face went white. David's jaw tightened, and I saw his hand curl into a fist under the table. Wait, my mother said, her voice rising. What about me? I'm his daughter. Mr. Shaw adjusted his glasses and looked at her with an expression that was both sympathetic and firm. Your father left specific instructions regarding your inheritance, Mrs. Brennan. He continued reading. To my daughter, Claire Brennan, I leave the sum of $5,000, with the hope that she will use it to reflect on the choices she has made and the people she has chosen to prioritize over her own family. This money is to be placed in a trust that she may only access after attending a minimum of 6 months of family counseling, which I have prepaid through Dr. Angela Morrison at the Riverside Counseling Center. My mother's mouth fell open. This is insane. He was losing his mind. He didn't know what he was doing. Your father was of sound mind when he drafted this will 18 months ago, Mr. Shaw said calmly. I can assure you, every decision was made with full legal capacity and clear intention. He was examined by Dr. Raymond Patel, his primary care physician, just 2 weeks before signing this document. I have the medical report here if you'd like to see it. David leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. This is undue influence. Harper manipulated him. She isolated him from his family. She probably told him all kinds of lies about Claire. I finally spoke, my voice shaking with anger. I didn't isolate him. You did. You and my mother abandoned me when I was a kid. Grandpa James was the only one who cared. That's not true, my mother snapped, her composure cracking. I tried to stay in touch, but you shut me out. You refused to answer my calls. You never called. You never visited. You didn't even come to my high school graduation. Because you made it clear you didn't want me there. I sent you an invitation. I waited for you for 2 hours before the ceremony, thinking maybe you'd show up.
You didn't even send a card.
My mother's face flushed red. You don't understand what it was like. David and I were building a life together. We had our own problems to deal with. I was your daughter. I was your problem to deal with. Mr. Shaw raised a hand. Please, let me finish. He turned the page and read the final paragraph, his voice taking on a more serious tone. I have included a no contest clause in this will. Any beneficiary who challenges the terms of this document will forfeit their inheritance entirely and will be responsible for all legal fees incurred during the contest. Additionally, I have recorded a video statement to be presented in court should any challenges arise. I have also documented a series of incidents over the past 15 years that demonstrate my daughter's absence from my life and my granddaughter's unwavering presence and support. These documents are filed with my attorney and may be submitted as evidence if necessary. I trust that my wishes will be respected. My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. We'll see about that. This is elder abuse. This is fraud. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to fight this. She stormed out, David following close behind. But before he left, he turned back and looked at me with an expression of pure hatred. You're going to regret this, he said quietly. We're going to take everything from you. The door slammed shut.
Mr. Shaw let out a long sigh.
Well,
that went about as expected. What happens now?
I asked, my hands trembling. Now we wait. If they file a contest, which I suspect they will, we'll go to court. But Harper, I want you to understand something. Your grandfather prepared for this. He knew this day would come. He has documentation, witnesses, medical records, and that video. Their case is weak at best. But it's still going to be difficult.
These things always are.
How long will it take? Could be 6 months. Could be longer. It depends on how aggressive they are and what kind of lawyer they hire. I nodded, feeling numb. Can I see the video?
The one he recorded.
Mr. Shaw hesitated, then nodded. Of course. I think you should see it. He pulled out a laptop and opened a file. The video began, and there was my grandfather, sitting in his study, looking directly at the camera. He was wearing his favorite flannel shirt, the blue one with the worn elbows, and his reading glasses were perched on his nose. Seeing him again, alive and speaking, broke something inside me. The tears came fast and hard. My name is James Arthur Taylor, he said, his voice strong and steady. I'm recording this on July 14, 2024, in the presence of my attorney, Leonard Shaw, and 2 witnesses, Margaret Chen and Robert Vasquez, both of whom I've known for over 20 years. I want to make it absolutely clear that I am of sound mind and body. I have drafted my will according to my own wishes, and no one has coerced or influenced me in any way. He paused, adjusting his glasses. I'm leaving the bulk of my estate to my granddaughter Harper because she is the only person in my family who has shown me true love and loyalty. She didn't come around when she needed something. She came around because she cared. She's been there for me when I was sick, when I was lonely, when I needed someone to talk to.
She's the daughter I wish I'd had.
His voice grew more emotional. When Harper was 14 years old, she came to me and asked if she could live with me. She was scared, she was hurting, and she felt like she had nowhere else to go. Her mother had chosen a man over her own child. Her mother had allowed that man to control, criticize, and demean her. And when Harper tried to speak up, she was told she was being dramatic. He leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. I will not let my money go to someone who abandoned their child. I will not let my money go to the man who made my granddaughter feel worthless. This is my decision, and I'm making it with full awareness of the consequences. The video continued for another 10 minutes. He talked about specific memories, the time he taught me to drive, the time we'd gone camping and gotten lost in the woods, the time I'd called him crying after failing my first college exam and he'd driven 3 hours just to take me out for ice cream and remind me that one setback didn't define my future. When the video ended, I was sobbing. Mr. Shaw handed me a box of tissues. He loved you very much, he said gently. I know, I whispered. I just wish I could tell him one more time that I loved him too. The lawsuit came 2 weeks later. I was at work, doing a clinical rotation at the hospital, when I got the email from Mr. Shaw. Claire Brennan and David Brennan were contesting the will, claiming undue influence, mental incapacity, and elder abuse. They were demanding that the will be declared invalid and that my grandfather's estate be divided according to state intestacy laws, which would give my mother the majority of the inheritance. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I had to excuse myself from my shift and go sit in my car, where I cried for 20 minutes straight. Mr. Shaw assured me that the case was weak. My grandfather had been examined by his doctor just weeks before he died and had been declared mentally sound. There was no evidence of coercion or manipulation, and the video he'd recorded would be a powerful piece of evidence. But the process was going to be long and expensive. Your grandfather anticipated this, Mr. Shaw said during our meeting the next day. That's why he included the no contest clause. If we win, and I believe we will, they'll lose everything. But you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. Your mother and David are going to do everything they can to discredit you. What does that mean? It means they're going to try to paint you as manipulative, greedy, and controlling. They're going to look for any evidence that you influenced your grandfather's decisions. They might dig into your past, your relationships, your finances. They might try to twist innocent interactions into something sinister. I felt sick. Can they do that? They can try. But the truth is on your side. And we have the evidence to prove it. Good, I said, my voice hardening. They don't deserve a dime. The months leading up to the trial were brutal. My mother launched a full-scale smear campaign against me. She posted on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, telling anyone who would listen that I was a gold digger who had manipulated a vulnerable old man. She claimed that I'd isolated my grandfather from his family, that I'd convinced him to cut her out of his life, that I'd only cared about his money. She shared old photos of herself with my grandfather, photos from when I was a baby, before the divorce, before everything fell apart. She wrote long, emotional posts about how much she'd loved her father, how much she missed him, and how devastated she was that her own daughter had stolen her inheritance. The comments section was filled with sympathy for her. People who didn't know the full story rallied around her, calling me awful names, saying I should be ashamed of myself. It was devastating. I made my social media accounts private, but the damage was done. People I knew, acquaintances from college, old co-workers, even some distant relatives, reached out to ask if what my mother was saying was true. David was worse. He hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. They followed me to work, to the grocery store, to the gym. They talked to my neighbors, my friends, my professors. They were looking for anything, any mistake, any indiscretion, any piece of information they could use against me. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find, but the invasion of privacy was violating. I started having panic attacks. I couldn't sleep. I lost 15 pounds. My friends and professors noticed, but I didn't know how to explain what I was going through. Monica was my rock during this time. She'd come over with takeout and force me to eat. She'd sit with me while I cried. She'd remind me that the truth would come out, that justice would prevail. But there were days when I wasn't sure I believed her. The worst part was the waiting. The trial kept getting postponed, first because David's lawyer needed more time to prepare, then because of scheduling conflicts with the judge, then because of a motion to compel discovery that took weeks to resolve. Each postponement felt like another blow. I just wanted it to be over. The only thing that kept me going was the memory of my grandfather. His voice in my head, telling me to stay strong, to fight for what's right, to not let them break me. I also started going through his things, slowly sorting through the house. I found journals he'd kept, filled with his thoughts and observations. In one entry from 5 years ago, he'd written, "Harper called today to check on me. She does that every day without fail. Even when she's busy with school or work, she always finds time to call. I don't think she realizes how much that means to me. Claire hasn't called in 3 years. I used to wonder what I did wrong, how I failed as a father. But I've come to realize that some people are just wired differently. Some people only care about what they can get from you. Harper isn't like that. She cares because she cares. And that's rare." Reading that made me cry all over again. The trial began on a cold morning in March, nearly 6 months after my grandfather's death. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with rows of wooden benches and a raised platform where the judge sat. My mother and David were on one side with their lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Gerald Finch who looked like he'd stepped out of a legal drama. I sat on the other side with Mr. Shaw. The judge, an older woman named Judge Patricia Moreno, called the court to order. She had sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately made me feel better. "We're here today to address the contest of James Taylor's will," she said. "Mr. Finch, you may present your opening statement." Finch stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Your Honor, this case is about a vulnerable elderly man who was manipulated by his granddaughter into disinheriting his own daughter. James Taylor was suffering from cognitive decline in the final years of his life. He was isolated from his family, confused, and under the undue influence of Harper Taylor, who stood to gain millions from his death. We will present evidence that Harper Taylor systematically alienated Mr. Taylor from his daughter, that she controlled his finances and his medical care, and that she used her position of trust to coerce him into changing his will. We ask that the court declare the will invalid and distribute Mr. Taylor's estate according to state intestacy laws." I wanted to stand up and scream, but Mr. Shaw placed a hand on my arm, steadying me. When it was his turn, Mr. Shaw stood slowly. He didn't button his jacket or make any theatrical gestures. He just spoke calmly and clearly. "Your Honor, this case is not about vulnerability or manipulation. It's about greed. Claire Brennan abandoned her father and her daughter years ago. She chose a controlling, abusive man over her own child. She made no effort to maintain a relationship with her father. She didn't visit him, she didn't call him, she didn't even send him a birthday card. And now, after learning there's a substantial inheritance, she's reappeared, claiming to be the devoted daughter she never was.
The evidence will show that James Taylor was of sound mind, that his decisions were his own, and that this lawsuit is nothing more than an attempt to circumvent his clearly stated wishes.
Judge Moreno nodded. Let's proceed. The first witness was Dr. Raymond Patel, my grandfather's primary care physician. Dr. Patel, Mr. Shaw began, how long were you James Taylor's doctor?
15 years.
And in your professional opinion, was Mr. Taylor suffering from any cognitive decline in the months leading up to his death? No. I conducted a full cognitive assessment just 6 weeks before he passed. He scored perfectly on the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. That's a standardized test we use to detect cognitive impairment. His memory was sharp, his decision-making ability was intact, his verbal fluency was excellent. There was no indication of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, or any other impairment. Did you have any concerns about his mental capacity to make legal decisions? None whatsoever. In fact, I would say Mr. Taylor was sharper than most men his age. He was well-read, articulate, and very much in control of his faculties. Finch tried to poke holes in the testimony during cross-examination. Dr. Patel, isn't it true that cognitive decline can fluctuate? That someone can seem fine one day and confused the next? That's true in cases of certain conditions, like delirium or advanced dementia. But Mr. Taylor didn't have those conditions. His cognitive function was consistently strong across multiple visits and assessments.
But you didn't see him every single day, did you? No, but I saw him regularly, and I had no reason to believe his condition varied significantly between visits.
Finch looked frustrated. No further questions. Next, Mr. Shaw called several of my grandfather's friends and neighbors to the stand. Mrs. Margaret Chen, who lived next door, testified that my grandfather had been sharp as a tack right up until his death. She talked about the conversations they'd had, about the book club they'd both been part of, about how he'd helped her fix her computer just days before he died. Did you ever witness Harper being controlling or manipulative with her grandfather? Mr. Shaw asked. Absolutely not, Mrs. Chen said firmly. Harper was wonderful to him. She visited him every week. She brought him groceries. She took him to his doctor's appointments. She genuinely cared about him. Did you ever see Claire Brennan visit her father? Not once.
Not in the 10 years I lived next door.
Finch's cross-examination was brief and unsuccessful. He tried to suggest that Mrs. Chen was biased because she was friends with my grandfather, but she shut him down quickly. I'm here because I care about the truth, she said. James was my friend, and I won't sit by while his wishes are disrespected. Another neighbor, Robert Vasquez, testified to similar things. He'd known my grandfather for 20 years and had never seen any sign of cognitive decline or undue influence. Then Mr. Shaw called Nancy Rodriguez, my grandfather's financial advisor. Ms. Rodriguez, how long did you manage Mr. Taylor's investments?
12 years.
Did he ever seem confused or uncertain about his financial decisions? Never. Mr. Taylor was very financially savvy. He understood his portfolio, he asked intelligent questions, and he made informed decisions. In fact, about 2 years ago, he called me to discuss reallocating some of his assets. He wanted to ensure that his granddaughter would be financially secure if anything happened to him.
It was a very lucid, well-reasoned conversation.
Did anyone else ever try to influence his financial decisions? Nancy hesitated, then said, yes. About 4 years ago, David Brennan contacted me claiming to be acting on Mr. Taylor's behalf. He wanted access to account information and wanted to make some changes to the portfolio. But when I called Mr. Taylor to confirm, he was furious. He told me under no circumstances was David Brennan to have any access to his accounts.
He said David had tried to steal from him before.
A murmur went through the courtroom. David's face turned red. Did Mr. Taylor provide any details about this alleged theft? He said that several years ago, David had convinced him to invest in a business opportunity that turned out to be fraudulent. Mr. Taylor lost about $50,000. Finch objected, saying the testimony was hearsay, but Judge Moreno overruled him, noting that it spoke to Mr. Taylor's state of mind and his reasons for making certain decisions. During cross-examination, Finch tried to discredit Nancy's testimony, but she didn't budge. She was calm, professional, and credible. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Mr. Shaw stood and addressed the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to present a video recording made by James Taylor 3 months before his death. Finch immediately objected. Your Honor, this is highly prejudicial.
We haven't had a chance to properly examine this evidence.
You've had a copy of this video for 3 months, Mr. Finch, Judge Moreno said dryly. Objection overruled.
Let's see it.
The courtroom lights dimmed, and a screen was set up at the front of the room. The video began. There was my grandfather, sitting in his study, looking directly at the camera. He was wearing his favorite flannel shirt, and behind him I could see his bookshelves, filled with the classics he loved: Hemingway, Steinbeck, Tolkien. "My name is James Arthur Taylor," he said, his voice strong and steady. "I'm recording this on July 14, 2024, in the presence of my attorney, Leonard Shaw, and two witnesses, Margaret Chen and Robert Vasquez. I want to make it absolutely clear that I am of sound mind and body. I have drafted my will according to my own wishes, and no one has coerced or influenced me in any way." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "I'm leaving the bulk of my estate to my granddaughter Harper, because she is the only person in my family who has shown me true love and loyalty. She didn't come around when she needed something. She came around because she cared. She's been there for me when I was sick, when I was lonely, when I needed someone to talk to. She's the daughter I wish I'd had." My eyes filled with tears. I heard someone behind me sniffling. "To my daughter Claire, I'm leaving a token amount, not out of spite, but out of hope. I hope she'll take this as an opportunity to reflect on her choices. She chose a man over her own child. She abandoned Harper when she needed her most. And she never once apologized or tried to make amends." He leaned forward, his expression growing more serious. "When Harper was 14, she came to me because she had nowhere else to go. Her mother had remarried, and her stepfather was cruel to her. He criticized her constantly. He controlled every aspect of her life, and when Harper tried to talk to her mother about it, she was dismissed. So Harper came to me, and I took her in without hesitation, because that's what family does. Family shows up." He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. "I want to address something directly. If anyone is watching this video in a courtroom, it means my will is being contested. To that person, probably my daughter, I say this: I made this decision with full awareness of what I was doing. I consulted with my attorney. I had my mental capacity evaluated. I documented everything. This is not a mistake. This is not confusion. This is a deliberate choice based on years of observation and experience." He looked directly into the camera, and it felt like he was looking right at me. "Harper, if you're watching this, I want you to know how proud I am of you. You've grown into an incredible young woman. You're kind, you're hardworking, you're resilient. You've overcome so much, and you've never let it make you bitter. You've stayed true to who you are. And that's rare." He smiled, that familiar warm smile I'd seen 1,000 times. "Use this money wisely. Finish your education. Buy a home. Travel. Live the life you deserve. And remember what I've taught you, that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about being there when it matters. It's about love." He paused one more time. "To anyone who thinks they can circumvent my wishes, know that I've taken every legal precaution to ensure this will stand. I've documented everything. I've gathered evidence. I've prepared for every possible challenge. This is my money, my legacy, and I've chosen to leave it to someone who deserves it. If you can't accept that, then you've proven exactly why I made the decision I did." The video ended. The courtroom was absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I looked over at my mother. Her face was streaked with tears, real ones this time. David sat rigid beside her, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Judge Moreno looked at my mother. "Mrs. Brennan, would you like to take the stand? Do you have anything you'd like to say in your defense?" My mother stood slowly. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she shook her head. She walked to the witness stand and sat down. "Mrs. Brennan," Judge Moreno said gently, "I want you to understand that anything you say here is under oath." "I understand," my mother said quietly. "Why did you contest your father's will?" My mother was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Because I thought it was unfair." "In what way?" "I'm his daughter. I thought I deserved more than $5,000. Did you maintain a relationship with your father in the years before his death?" My mother hesitated. "Not as much as I should have." "Did you visit him?" "No." "Did you call him?" "Not often." "Did you send him birthday cards, Christmas cards, any form of communication?" "No." "Why not?" My mother's voice broke. "Because I was ashamed. Because I knew I'd made mistakes. Because every time I thought about reaching out, I remembered how I'd failed Harper, how I'd chosen David over my own daughter, and I didn't know how to face my father after that." She was crying now, really crying. "I know I was a terrible mother. I know I made the wrong choices. I know I hurt Harper in ways I can never fix. But he was still my father. And when I found out he'd died, all I could think about was all the time I'd wasted, all the conversations we'd never have, all the chances I'd missed to make things right." Judge Moreno's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "Mrs. Brennan, I appreciate your honesty. But the question before this court is not whether you loved your father. It's whether his will represents his true wishes. And based on the evidence presented, the medical records, the witness testimony, the video recording, it's clear that it does. She turned to Finch. Counselor, do you have any evidence to refute the testimony and documentation presented today? Finch stood, looking defeated.
No, Your Honor.
Judge Moreno nodded.
Then I'm ready to make my ruling.
She ruled in my favor.
It is the decision of this court that the will of James Arthur Taylor is valid and will be upheld in its entirety.
The evidence presented has conclusively demonstrated that Mr. Taylor was of sound mind at the time he drafted his. This response paused because Claude reached its max length for a message. Hit continue to nudge Claude along. Continue will. There is no credible evidence of undue influence, coercion, or mental incapacity. His wishes, as clearly stated in both written and video form, will be respected. She turned to my mother. Mrs. Brennan, I want to be very clear about something. Your father included a no-contest clause in his will. By challenging this will, you have violated that clause. As a result, you forfeit your inheritance entirely. You will receive nothing from your father's estate. Additionally, you and Mr. Brennan are jointly and severally liable for all legal fees incurred during this proceeding. Those fees currently total $83,000. My mother's face went white. But Judge Moreno wasn't finished. Furthermore, during the course of this trial, evidence has emerged suggesting potential financial misconduct by Mr. Brennan. Specifically, allegations that he defrauded Mr. Taylor of approximately $50,000 several years ago, and that he attempted to gain unauthorized access to Mr. Taylor's financial accounts. I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation. Mr. Brennan, you are advised to retain criminal counsel. David shot to his feet. This is ridiculous. You can't. Sit down, Mr. Brennan, Judge Moreno said sharply. You are not a party to this case, and you have no standing in this courtroom. If you continue to disrupt these proceedings, I will hold you in contempt. David sat, his face red with fury. Judge Moreno turned to me. Ms. Taylor, your grandfather clearly loved you very much. He wanted to ensure your future was secure, and he took extraordinary steps to protect his wishes. I hope you will honor his memory by living the life he envisioned for you.
I will, Your Honor, I said, my voice breaking.
I promise.
Court is adjourned.
The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within 2 weeks, David was arrested and charged with fraud, theft, and attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person. The district attorney's investigation uncovered even more than we'd known. David had been running a series of investment scams, defrauding multiple elderly clients out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was eventually sentenced to 8 years in prison. My mother filed for divorce before his trial even began. She lost their house, their car, and most of their savings paying legal fees. She moved into a small apartment across town and got a job as a receptionist at a dental office. She tried to reach out to me several times in the months after the trial. She sent letters, emails, text messages. She apologized. She said she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again, but she hoped that someday I might be able to forgive her. I didn't respond. Maybe one day I would. Maybe someday I'd be ready to have that conversation. But not yet. The wounds were still too fresh, the betrayal still too raw. I stood in my grandfather's house, my house now, looking out at the backyard where we used to sit and talk for hours. It was late spring, and the garden he'd planted was in full bloom. Roses, tulips, daffodils, all the flowers he'd loved. I decided to keep the house. It was too full of memories to sell. I'd renovated the upstairs, turning one of the spare bedrooms into a home office where I could study. I'd kept his study exactly as it was, his books, his desk, his reading chair. It felt like a shrine, and maybe it was. I'd also used some of the money to set up the James Taylor Scholarship Fund for youth in foster care who wanted to pursue higher education. The fund would cover tuition, books, housing, and living expenses for 4 students every year. It was the kind of thing my grandfather would have loved. I donated to the food bank where he'd volunteered every Saturday for the past decade. I'd contributed to the veterans organization he'd supported. I'd made sure his legacy lived on in ways that mattered. But mostly, I'd focused on finishing my nursing degree. I was in my final semester now, doing my clinical rotations at the same hospital where I'd gotten the call about his death. It felt right, somehow. Like I was coming full circle. My friends kept telling me I should travel, buy a fancy car, live it up. But that wasn't who I was. That wasn't what my grandfather had taught me. Money is a tool, he'd said. Use it wisely. So I was building a life that would make him proud. A life based on the values he'd instilled in me: integrity, compassion, hard work. Some nights, I'd sit in his study and read his journals. He'd kept them for over 40 years, documenting his thoughts, his experiences, his observations about life. Reading them felt like having a conversation with him. In one entry from 6 months before he died, he'd written, "I'm getting older. I can feel it in my bones, in the way I get tired more easily, in the way I sometimes forget what I walked into a room for. But my mind is still sharp. My purpose is still clear. I want to make sure Harper is taken care of. She's been through so much, and she's come out the other side stronger and kinder than I ever could have hoped. She deserves every opportunity in the world. And I'm going to make sure she has them. Reading that made me smile through my tears. A year after the trial, I graduated from nursing school. I stood on that stage, wearing my cap and gown, and all I could think about was how much I wished my grandfather could be there. But, in a way, he was. I felt him in the choices I made, in the person I'd become, in the life I was building. Monica threw me a small graduation party at my house. Just a few close friends, nothing fancy. We grilled burgers in the backyard and sat around the fire pit, talking and laughing. At one point, Monica pulled me aside. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said.
"I really am."
"Your grandpa would be so proud of you."
"I know."
I smiled.
"I carry him with me every day."
2 years after the trial, I was working as a registered nurse in the pediatric unit at St. Michael's Hospital. I loved my job. I loved the kids, the families, the sense of purpose that came with helping people through some of the hardest moments of their lives. One afternoon, I was checking on a 7-year-old girl named Emma who'd just had surgery. Her mother was sitting beside her bed, holding her hand, looking exhausted but relieved. "Thank you," the mother said to me. "Thank you for taking such good care of her."
"It's my pleasure," I said. "She's a fighter."
As I left the room, I thought about my grandfather. About all the ways he'd taken care of me. About all the ways he'd fought for me. And I realized that his legacy wasn't just the money he'd left me. It was the lessons he'd taught me. The values he'd instilled in me. The person he'd helped me become. That was the real inheritance. 5 years after the trial, I was sitting in the office of the James Taylor Scholarship Fund, reviewing applications for the upcoming academic year. We'd expanded the program. Now we were funding 8 students per year instead of 4. One application caught my eye. It was from a 17-year-old girl named Maya who'd spent most of her life in foster care. She wanted to study social work so she could help other kids like her. Her essay was beautiful. She wrote about resilience, about finding family in unexpected places, about the power of having someone believe in you. It reminded me of myself. I approved her application immediately. That evening, I drove out to the cemetery where my grandfather was buried. I did this every few months, just to sit with him for a while, to talk to him about my life, to update him on everything that was happening. I sat down on the grass beside his headstone and told him about Maya, about the scholarship fund, about the work I was doing at the hospital. "I think you'd be proud," I said out loud. "I hope you'd be proud." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees overhead. And for just a moment, I could have sworn I felt his presence beside me. "I miss you every day," I whispered. "But I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I'm living the life you wanted for me. And I'm making sure other people get that chance too." I stayed there for a while, watching the sun set, feeling grateful for everything he'd given me. Not just the money, but the love, the guidance, the unshakable belief that I was worth fighting for. That was the gift that kept on giving. That was the legacy that would last forever. And as I drove home that night, I made a promise to myself, and to him. I would keep showing up. I would keep fighting for what's right. I would keep living a life that honored his memory. Because that's what he deserved. And that's what I owed him.
Not because of the money,
but because of the love. And love, I'd learned, was worth more than any inheritance could ever be.